Hi, everybody. My name is Peter Lindsley. I'm a product manager at Google working on image search. Now, what we thought we'd do today was to run over some slides that I presented at SMX West in February 2009, actually just a couple of weeks ago. And the slides were very sort of a high-level introduction to image search. So first of all, I thought we'd run through the presentation that I gave at SMS West, and then afterwards I'll run through some of the questions that came up that seemed like topics of interest to the webmasters. Okay, so I'll start the presentation. So first of all, our mission with Google Image Search is to organize the world's images. We put a lot of focus on satisfying the end user. So when they come with a query and they have an image that they're looking for, our goal is to provide relevant and useful images for that query. And of course, the theory here being that if they find what they're looking for and they enjoy their experience, they'll come back and use us again. What I wanted to get out of this talk as well was to start to engage a little bit more with the webmaster community. If we look at what has come out of various conferences like this, where web search representatives from different companies have gone out and had a conversation with the webmasters and found out what their pain points were, and we found this sort of ad hoc consortium came together and came up with things like the sitemap standard, or they came up with rel nofollow, or they came up with robots wildcards and things along those lines. So one of our hopes in image search is that we can try and start this dialogue and find out what sort of pain points you guys might have as webmasters, where we, at the likes of Google and also other search engine companies, can try and come together and try and enhance the end user experience by finding easier ways for you guys to get your images both indexed and ranked. Okay, so I'm just going to move on to the first slide that I had. I wanted to paint a little bit of a picture of image searches, what they do and why they might be slightly different to the kind of audience you might be used to with web search. First of all, image search appears in a lot of places beyond images.google.com. You've probably seen images appear in universal search. So whenever you do a query like pictures of San Francisco, there might well be a portion of the results page that's dedicated to showing images for that result. And the theory here is very much in line with our goal at image search, which is that we're going to show you those results when we believe they're very useful and informative and relevant to the query. Images also appear in other places, like on maps. You might have seen a little row of images in maps which come from our panoramio.com property, which is a really cool product if you haven't seen it before. So images appear everywhere across all of our properties, and we're really just trying to align it with when they match the user intent or they enhance the user experience. Image searches also have a very unique search behavior. They're very different animals to web searches. If you think about the paradigm, when they do a query, it's not so much about what's the first result. We don't really have this sort of I'm feeling lucky paradigm. It's more about saying, here's a query. Well, here's 20 images that you might like. And users can consume those images in a heartbeat. And if the image they happen to like is at the bottom left-hand corner or the bottom right-hand corner, then so be it. They'll see that. There'll be something about that image that attracts them, and they'll click through. The other thing that they do is they search a lot of images. So there's a lot of next paging going on. They'll go very deep looking for the image that they like. One of the reasons why this happens is that a lot of queries we see are very subjective in nature. So if you see a query like waterfalls, then the waterfall that you like and the waterfall that I like might be on two very different pages. And there's no way as a search engine we can figure out what you're looking for. So there's a lot of next paging. Users can consume results very quickly. And it's just interesting to think about what that might mean to you guys as marketers, that it's not all about being in the first position on the first page. There's also a lot of novel use cases of image search, which might not be apparent. Users use image search for inspiration. They want to get a haircut or a tattoo, and they're looking for ideas. So tattoo ideas, and then they go through the pages looking for some inspiration. Quite often they'll refine their query. There's a lot of sort of exploring and this sort of browse with intent. Users also use image search for shopping. They use it for research, health queries, or sometimes they just use it just to kill time, just for the fun of it. And another really interesting use case that we've seen is using image search as a visual dictionary. So there's a Googler in Germany who's learning German, and if he hears a noun or a word that he's not too sure what it is, he'll type it in, and he knows exactly what the word means, even though he doesn't look it up in a text dictionary. OK, so this is a slide on how does image search work. Simply put, as a webmaster, you'll see Googlebot come along and download the HTML as normal. Then what happens is we pass through your page and we look for references to images. And typically references to images can come in one of two forms. It's either an href, where you're linking to an image directly, or it's an inlined image in an image source tag. Then what happens is we come along and crawl the images and then go through this process of classifying it. Now, what we're trying to do here is to figure out how to bucketize this image correctly. And one classification we do is to work out if it's a photograph or not. Another one might be, does it contain a face? Other buckets might be things like, is it line art? Is it black and white? Or is it an unsavory image that we want to put under safe search, only show when safe search is disabled? So this sort of classification goes on. And the reason we do that is we found that image searchers really like to slice and dice their results. They like to do a query and look at it and say, well, these images are sort of nice, but I really wanted to see just images with faces in them. So if you've seen across the top of the results page, there's a blue bar which contains some drop-downs where you can actually filter the results down to just photographs or just faces or just line art and so on and so forth. And these filters tend to get used quite heavily. So we like to try and bucketize things off so that they're shown in a more relevant context. Finally, of course, the images are indexed. And that's where we scroll them away and we have an index of the image with all the text that we associate with it, with that particular image. Another part of this process is about identifying the duplicates. So if you think about the way images are typically deployed online, you might put an image up and a particular page will refer to it. Another page might refer to it. You might have other pages on your site that refer to it. Every now and again, an image will get copied, and maybe it gets copied as is, or maybe it gets transformed ever so slightly. But as far as the user is concerned, it's still very much the same image. So the next process we go through is one of trying to cluster all of the very similar or identical images and try and treat them as one. And this is very much the same as the way things are done in web, when web pages are analyzed for duplicates, and then one sort of canonical winner is picked out of that entire group. So the same thing happens with image search. We try and identify all the duplicates. And again, the main reason for us doing this is that when somebody comes in and types blue widgets, we really don't want to be showing them exactly the same blue widget 20 times. We want to try and cluster those together and say, well, here's one interpretation and here's another one. So there are multiple images. Our goal is to try and cluster these and figure out which is the best one. And at the same time, we have multiple pages that are including that image. And another task is at runtime, at query time, to try and figure out which one of these referrers makes most sense for this particular image that we've chosen. And the answer to this is we try and choose the best one. We try and choose the best image that meets the user's intent more accurately. And maybe it's about size, or maybe it's about quality, or something like that. And the referring page that includes that image is selected based on how good it is, essentially. And that could be one of many things, such as its relevance to the actual query itself. And finally, ranking is performed on a whole lot of signals. And typically, we don't get into the details of the signals, but it's very much like web. There's more than one signal that we use to try and figure out what the most relevant image would be. So the next slide is on best practices. So you're sitting there thinking, this sounds great. I've got good images that I think are going to be useful for your users. What can I do about it? So probably the best bit of advice we can give is to really focus on the user. Now, you might be thinking, what exactly does that mean? What can I go out and do tomorrow to focus on the user? The answer is pretty simple. If you think of a user that comes to Google image search and what they might be looking for, and if we take one use case, such as coloring pages, maybe they're looking for a site that has a lot of coloring pages, and they choose to use image search to get there, then the first thing they're going to do is come along and type in coloring pages, and they're going to look at the results, and maybe they see something they like, maybe they don't. They might hit next page a few times, and all of a sudden one image will catch their eye, and they like it for some reason. And maybe it's just the quality of the image itself, or maybe it's the snippet. Maybe there's something about the size or the host name that sort of draws their attention. Maybe it's coloringpages.com. I know that site. I'm going to click through. I trust it. Then they land up on your page. And the question is, well, what sort of experience are you immersing them into? What sort of experience are they getting now that they've come to your page, given that they were looking for coloring pages? Do they see the coloring page they just clicked on above the fold? Is it large enough? It's one thing to send people to a coloring page where you show them very small thumbnails, and there's another thing to say, well, this is what you've just clicked on. Here it is. Here's some descriptive text. Here are some related pictures. Here's some comments from users and ratings and all sorts of things. So it's really about immersing the user into a very image-centric experience. And these are the kinds of landing pages and the kind of images we've observed that our users tend to like. And again, our intent is to try and match up the intent with the end user. So focus on the user. High quality images are always good. If you're taking photographs to put on your site, go and buy a digital SLR. Learn how to use it. Get a good lens. Take really nice high quality pictures. You don't necessarily have to take up the whole screen with the photograph or the image, but just large enough is usually what users like. Above the fold and plenty of descriptive text. Fundamentally, the impetus to all of image search is a text query. And the extent to which you have a lot of descriptive text that's on topic and talks about what's in the image. Maybe you want to expose EXIF data. Maybe it talks about where the image was taken. Maybe it has a nice title across the top. All those sorts of things are really good clues for us to figure out when an image is relevant and not. But more importantly, it's useful for the end user. They can read the description, read the caption, and learn a lot more about the image. The last slide, I talk about resources. We have Webmaster Help Centers where you can go and read a lot more about image search. And we also have forums where you can post questions about image search. And we really, really encourage webmasters to come to these forums and post all of their questions or concerns. And we monitor these very closely, and we pick up these concerns, and we'll take a look at them. There's also a web search help and forum for end users. So if you're an end user of image search and you have questions, you can leave them there. And the other thing is to monitor the Google official blog, because that's where we typically put out announcements of new features and changes and news and what have you, specifically around image search. So that was the end of my presentation that I gave at SMX in a nutshell. So at the end of the presentation, we had Q&A. And I wanted to pick up on a couple of questions that came up during that time. So the first question was, hey, you guys mentioned large images are a good best practice. But I have a concern with that because I don't want to load up the really, really large version of the image that I have because it takes the page a whole lot of time to load up. So how do I balance that? How do I manage the trade-off there? So I think the answer to this question is just to show an image that's large enough. Typically, 2/3 of the screen is maybe one sort of rule of thumb. But the point here being that users tend to like, to actually be able to see the image as opposed to it being a very small thumbnail. And a good way to get around this, to sort of, allow users to see the larger version if they wanted to, is to turn your image into a link to either the large image itself or another HTML page that includes a larger version of the image. Ultimately, nobody really wants to see an image that's larger than the browser size. So another question that came up was about analytics. And somebody was saying, hey, can I get analytics information from traffic that's coming from image search? The answer is absolutely. In the referrer string that we send across, or the browser sends across, both the query that ranked the image plus the image itself is sent in that string. So one slight difference with image search, of course, is that we're not necessarily sending people to your page as much as we're sending people to your image on the page. And there could, of course, be more than one image. So by passing apart the referrer string, you should be able to get all the analytics you need to know, what query sent the user there and what image sent the user there. So that about wraps it up. I hope you found this useful. By all means, drop all of your questions in Webmaster Help forums, and we'll swing by and take a look. Thanks.